Fortnite Battle Royale has been out for more than 8 years, and in these past 8 years, it has had a massive influence on the entirety of gaming, popularizing things like the Battle Pass system and completely shattering the idea that a game being free automatically meant that it was low quality. No matter if you love or hate Fortnite, you have to admit its impact on the gaming community, and when a game this influential releases, it's bound to have countless knockoffs trying to cash in on the genre. So today we're going to explore some of these quote-unquote Fortnite killers and where they are at in the present day. Before we begin, little shameless plug, I am going to be streaming on Twitch soon, so if you would kindly consider dropping me a follow with notifications on, that would mean the world to me. Now on to the video. Starting off, we have a game that a lot of people probably recognize. This is Realm Royale, developed by Hi-Rez Studios. It was a battle royale that was similar to Fortnite in many ways, but is one of the only ones on this list that I wouldn't consider a direct ripoff. Realm Royale came into existence pretty much just because of the community. You see, Hi-Rez Studios also developed a game called Paladins, which, to put it simply, was a Overwatch ripoff. And around the time that Fortnite released, Hi-Rez Studios released a game mode on Paladins called Paladins Battlegrounds. This was a mini battle royale game mode with the heroes from Paladins, and people loved this game mode so much that they begged Hi-Rez Studios to turn it into a full game, and that is exactly what they did. This game was really made for the community, and look, Hi-Rez Studios is known for making these quite well developed knockoffs. They rarely make a completely original idea into a game, and Realm Royale is very much clearly inspired by Fortnite. But the fact that it exists because the community wanted it to completely justifies its existence in my opinion. And also the fact that you turn into a chicken when you get knocked is pretty cool. But unfortunately, due to declining player counts and the fact that Hi-Rez Studios wanted to shift their attention to another one of their games called Smite 2, Realm Royale officially ended up shutting down in February of 2025. I remember I actually played a bit of Realm Royale back in the day, and I recall it being pretty fun, so it's a bit of a bummer that it ended up shutting down. Next up on the list, we have Creative Destruction. This was one of the most popular Fortnite knockoffs, garnering millions of players and even being streamed by some of the biggest streamers like Tfue and Daquan. It's safe to say that this game was almost a one-to-one knockoff of Fortnite. I know there's a lot of people who love this game even more than Fortnite, but from what I see, it just didn't do anything that much better than Fortnite did. I personally never got into this game, and the building mechanics look pretty lackluster in my opinion, but despite all of this, the game garnered tens of millions of downloads during its lifespan and can overall be considered a success. Unfortunately, however, the game did end up shutting down in June of 2022, and this was pretty expected as the developers NetEase Games neglected the game and failed to provide any meaningful updates except skin releases every now and then. So let me know if you played Creative Destruction. I also wanted to quickly mention another title that a lot of you may have played, which is Rules of Survival. This game was actually also developed by NetEase Games and was a lot of people's first ever battle royale game on mobile, and it actually released in November of 2017, while Fortnite Battle Royale released in September of 2017. So it really only took a couple of months for Rules of Survival to release, and it actually released before Fortnite Mobile did. This game ended up being shut down on the same exact day that Creative Destruction was shut down, which was June 27th, 2022, and that was likely the day that NetEase chose to shut down a few of their unpopular titles. But yeah, let me know if you played Rules of Survival. The Darwin Project was another quite popular class-based battle royale game that was quite unique in my opinion. There would be 10 players in a match and another player with the role of show director. The 10 players fought until there was one last person standing, and the show director could influence gameplay by closing the zones, dropping items, and revealing player locations. They basically had control over how the game was played out. It was set in the post-apocalyptic Canadian Rockies as humanity approached an ice age, and the game featured some very solid ideas. Initially, you spawn in only equipped with an axe and a bow, and you have to gather resources and survive while defeating the other players. The game released in 2018 and ended up peaking in player count shortly after at over 12,000 concurrent players on Steam. There's probably a lot more on console as well, but unfortunately we can't get those numbers. However, player counts dwindled quite quickly, and in May of 2020, the studio behind the game, Scavenger Studio, announced that they would stop any further development on the game, but in November of 2020, they announced that servers in the EU and the US would stay open, and I believe they're still open to this day, so you can actually still play the game even though there's like 4 players online. It's hard to pinpoint a reason why this game fell off because it had a solid idea, passionate developers, and it wasn't just a crappy knockoff, but I just think that it is the fate of any Fortnite competitor to just fall off. Next up on the list we have Cuisine Royale, which is a game that some of you may have played. I know I sure did back in the day. It comes from the same studio that made Enlisted, which is another game you may have heard of or played. Cuisine Royale put several dozen players on a map surrounded by a shrinking ring of death similar to Fortnite, and all the players fight until there's only one player standing. It's pretty much just a standard Fortnite / PUBG knockoff. And the game was actually created as an April Fool's joke based on the engine of Enlisted, with pretty much the same weapons from the Enlisted game as well. But the publisher ended up deciding to actually release the game as a standalone title, and it fully launched in December of 2019, at one point becoming the third most downloaded free-to-play title in the PlayStation Store. It was promoted as a parody title, mocking games like PUBG, and people mostly knew it as the game where you could use kitchenware as weapons and armor. Eventually, however, the developers decided to drop these kitchen-related items and jokes and make the game a lot more serious, which in my opinion probably ended up killing the game, because in the long run it removed any originality that the game had. The game was so similar to PUBG after this removal that people could just go and play PUBG or any other knockoff because the kitchen stuff is what actually made the game unique. At one point they ended up renaming the game to Cursed Food, which stands for Cuisine Royale 2nd Edition Fulfillment of All Desires. I don't know why they made the name just a really big acronym, but more recently they renamed it again to Cursed Cuisine Royale, which just means Cuisine Royale 2nd Edition Cuisine Royale. And they added back some of the kitchen stuff to the images on the Steam page. But at this point the game is pretty much already dead, barely averaging 100 players. So overall, I don't think that these games died as a fault of their own. Some of them, like the Darwin Project, were likely inspired by Fortnite, but ended up becoming something completely unique and special. But unfortunately, games that attempt to enter the same space as Fortnite just end up completely crushed. I mean, to even begin to compete with the amount of updates and skins and events that Fortnite holds, you would need to have a team with hundreds or maybe even a couple of thousands of employees. Realistically, the only games that can somewhat compete with Fortnite are games with low-end requirements that run mostly on smartphones in developing nations. In countries that people can't really afford gaming computers or high-end mobile devices or consoles, you'll find that games like Garena Free Fire are hugely popular with over 1 billion downloads. And I believe Garena Free Fire might even have more concurrent players than Fortnite does. You just might not hear as much about it because it's more popular in places like India and South America. Anyways though, I hope you did enjoy the video. If you want to see more videos like these, let me know. And just as a friendly reminder, I am going to be streaming on Twitch soon, so if you'd like to drop a follow, it would mean the world to me. A like and sub would be truly appreciated, and let me know what video you'd like to see in the future. See ya!